In today's episode, we're diving into the fascinating life and reign of Richard the Lionheart, a legendary figure in European history. Known for his bravery, military prowess, and ruthless approach, Richard left a lasting legacy that continues to be celebrated today. So, prepare to be captivated as we journey through Richard's adventures during his unforgettable reign from 1189 to 1199 CE. Richard's strategic successes in defending English territories and his relentless dedication to the Third Crusade were unmatched. Yet, he spent a mere 6 months of his reign in England. Through Richard's skillful management of allies and enemies, he earned himself a favorable reputation, despite his absence from his own kingdom. The Third Crusade, although faced with many obstacles, such as Frederick Barbarossa's unfortunate drowning, managed to result in some significant military accomplishments. Led by Richard's bravery, he successfully conquered Messina in Sicily and Cyprus, and played a pivotal role in the siege of Acre. His victories cemented his status as the fearless Lionheart. However, Richard's journey was not always smooth, as he faced imprisonment and ransomed, with his kingdom's resources being drained to ensure his release. The newly liberated king focused his efforts on campaigns against his former ally, Francis Philip II. Although Richard left no heir behind, his legacy as the epitome of a chivalrous knight has endured through the centuries. A striking statue of the king outside the Houses of Parliament in London is just one example of the lasting admiration that Richard the Lionheart has garnered. Remain with us as we delve deeper into Richard's tumultuous upbringing, his military conquests during the Third Crusade, and his seemingly never-ending conflicts with family and allies. We'll examine the fascinating events that shaped this extraordinary historical figure, and how his influence, especially his iconic emblem of 3 lions, has left an indelible mark on England's history. Richard the Lionheart, also known as Richard I of England, governed England between 1189 and 1199 CE. Born to Henry II of England and Eleanor of Aquitaine, Richard gained recognition for his bravery and military achievements. However, he devoted most of his time to the Third Crusade and defending English territories in France, spending a mere 6 months of his reign in England. Celebrated during his lifetime for his military prowess and ruthless approach, Richard the Lionheart has become a legendary figure in European history. After succumbing to battle at Chalais, France, Richard's younger brother, King John of England, succeeded him. Born on September 8, 1157 CE, at Beaumont Palace in Oxford, Richard was the 3rd child of King Henry II of England and Eleanor of Aquitaine, previously married to King Louis VII of France. Richard's education was influenced by his mother's fascination with chivalric medieval literature. An enthusiast of poetry, Richard wrote his own poems in French and Occitan. Described as a tall, blue-eyed and attractive individual, Richard inherited reddish-blonde hair and was already renowned for his courage. The tumultuous relationship between England and France persisted during this period, with Richard's family at the core of the chaos. Consequently, Richard participated in 2 rebellions against his father. The first revolt against the king occurred in 1173 CE, involving Richard, his brothers Henry and Geoffrey, the Count of Brittany, and William the Lion of Scotland. The uprising was likely orchestrated by Eleanor of Aquitaine. Driven by the desire to expand their territories at the cost of the English monarchy, the assassination of Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in his own cathedral in 1170 CE became a rallying point, especially since Henry II was believed to be involved in this heinous act. At just 15 years old, Richard had been knighted by Louis VII, who also sought to weaken Henry's rule, and sent on a campaign to invade eastern Normandy, then controlled by the English crown. Although the rebels couldn't overthrow Henry II due to his loyal barons and numerous castles, Richard was pardoned after pledging allegiance to his father. On the other hand, Eleanor faced imprisonment for her involvement. However, it wasn't the end, as Henry II grappled to maintain control over his kingdom in his final years. Holding the titles of Duke of Aquitaine and Count of Poitou, Prince Richard bolstered his growing reputation as a talented military commander and castle besieger by suppressing an uprising by the barons of Aquitaine. His capture of the previously considered impenetrable castle of Taillebourg in 1179 CE was a particularly impressive achievement. Less admirable, however, were the accounts of his brutal treatment of prisoners and forcing captured noblewomen into prostitution. Despite his accomplishments, Richard craved more. Then fortune struck. His main competitor for the English throne, his older brother Henry the Young King, passed away in June 1183 CE. King Henry II had even designated his son as king-in-waiting in 1170 CE, but the young king's demise from dysentery derailed the king's carefully laid succession plans. Furthermore, Richard's other sibling, Geoffrey, died in a tragic accident at a medieval tournament on 19 August 1186 CE. Now, Richard was perfectly positioned to be the next king of England, but he wouldn't just wait for events to unfold. Once more, in 1188-9 CE, Richard opposed his father when he and his younger brother John joined forces with Philip II, the new king of France. The uprising once again received support from Eleanor, with the legendary incident involving the renowned medieval knight, Sir William Marshal, who fought against Richard. Although Richard was at his mercy, Sir William chose to kill the prince's horse instead. Whether due to their competition or in appreciation for his noble act, Richard eventually granted William Chepstow Castle, as previously promised by Henry II. As a result of losing Maine and Touraine, Henry finally accepted peace terms that acknowledged Richard as his sole successor. Upon the king's death shortly after, Richard succeeded him on September 2, 1189 CE at Westminster Abbey. His kingdom also included the remaining French territories owned by the Angevins, Normandy, Maine, and Aquitaine. Despite his father's promise, Richard declined to grant John Aquitaine, exacerbating the rivalry between the brothers. Richard's primary, and possibly only, objective was to fulfill his 1187 CE vow to take the cross and aid in capturing Jerusalem from the Muslims. To fund his mission, the king exhausted the kingdom's resources, even negotiating a deal with William the Lion, granting the Scottish king complete feudal autonomy in exchange for money. Despite his absence from England for much of his reign, his inability to speak English, and his reckless expenditure on foreign wars, Richard has managed to maintain a remarkably favorable reputation among the English public. In response to Jerusalem's seizure in 1187 CE by Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, Pope Gregory VIII called for the Third Crusade. 3 monarchs heeded the call: Frederick Barbarossa, Philip II of France, and Richard. As the 3 most influential men in Western Europe, the campaign seemed more promising than the Second Crusade of 1147-49 CE. Regrettably for Christendom, the Crusaders only managed to catch a glimpse of Jerusalem and made no effort to attack the sacred city. In fact, the entire mission faced many obstacles, with Barbarossa's accidental drowning being the most significant one, occurring even before they reached the Holy Land. Following the Holy Roman Emperor's death, most of his army, devastated by grief, retreated back home, leaving only the English and French knights who were not exactly the best of allies. Despite these initial setbacks, there were some noteworthy military accomplishments. Richard, who travelled by sea to the Middle East, first conquered Messina in Sicily in 1190 CE, followed by Cyprus in May 1191 CE. In the latter campaign, the island's self-styled ruler Isaac Komnenos, who had detached from the Byzantine Empire, was captured, and the Crusaders governed until the Venetians took over in 1571 CE. However, these side missions did not contribute significantly to the primary goal of reclaiming Jerusalem, although Cyprus served as a valuable supply base. Eventually, the Crusaders reached the Holy Land and successfully concluded the siege of Acre on the coast of the Kingdom of Jerusalem on 12 July 1191 CE. Initiated by the French nobleman Guy of Lusignan, who attacked by sea, the protracted siege finally succeeded when sappers, incentivized by Richard, destabilized the city's fortification walls on the land side. Richard, now known as the Lionheart due to his bravery and audacity in warfare, achieved in 5 weeks what Guy could not accomplish in 20. Legend has it, the king was ill with scurvy of the time, and had his servants carry him on a stretcher so he could still fire his crossbow at the enemy battlements. However, Richard tarnished his good king reputation when he ordered the execution of 3,000 prisoners. During this time, Guy of Lusignan became the new ruler of Cyprus, after Richard the Lionheart sold the territory to the Knights Templar. In September 1191 CE, the English king scored a monumental victory against Saladin's forces at Arsuf. However, they were unable to capitalize on this momentum. Richard's army came close to Jerusalem but, considering their dwindled numbers, knew they would be unable to maintain control of the city in the face of an imminent counterattack. Additionally, urgent matters in both France and England forced the kings to abandon the crusade. Regardless, Richard managed to negotiate a peace agreement with Saladin in Jaffa, securing a small section of land surrounding Acre as well as the safety of Christian pilgrims visiting the Holy Land. While the outcome wasn't quite what they initially sought, the potential for a fourth crusade remained. Richard even suggested that a future campaign against the Arabs might benefit from targeting Egypt, the vulnerable underbelly of their empire. This strategy was eventually used in the Fourth Crusade, though it ultimately shifted focus to the magnificent city of Constantinople. The English king also brought home some valuable technological innovations from the crusade. The Byzantines possessed a formidable weapon known as Greek fire, an incendiary substance propelled through pressurized tubes, which had long been a zealously guarded secret until it was eventually stolen by the Arabs. It seems that Richard obtained the formula from Arab alchemists he encountered during the crusade, as he effectively utilized it in England and his later campaigns in France. However, before King Richard could return to England, one final misfortune would befall him during the ill-fated crusade. In 1192 CE, Richard's ship was wrecked on the journey back, leading to his arrest by Leopold of Austria, whom Richard had deeply offended during the crusade. Eventually handed over to Henry VI, the new Holy Roman Emperor, the English king was held for ransom. It wasn't until 1194 CE that Richard was finally set free, and one could only imagine the frustration experienced by the adventurous king during his nearly 2-year captivity. The colossal ransom of 150,000 marks was primarily funded through new taxes in England and Normandy. The sum was so enormous, however, that even taxation couldn't cover the entire amount, forcing Richard to offer several noble hostages to make up the difference. Meanwhile, with the king fighting overseas, English politics were managed by the capable Hubert Walter. Serving as the Bishop of Salisbury in 1189 CE before becoming Archbishop of Canterbury in 1193 CE, Walter proved to be an adept statesman, a skill that would soon become invaluable. While Richard was held captive in the Holy Roman Empire, his younger brother John, in collusion with Philip II of France, attempted unsuccessfully to seize the throne. Walter was able to counteract the usurper with the assistance of another competent, though somewhat insensitive, minister, Chancellor William Longchamp, who oversaw the kingdom's finances in Richard's absence. The conflict primarily revolved around sieges and control of strategically important castles, such as Nottingham and Windsor Castle, but the crown ultimately emerged victorious. Richard ultimately forgave his brother's excessive ambition and even designated him as his successor. Hubert Walter played a crucial role in obtaining the substantial ransom needed to secure his king's liberation. In 1193 CE, Walter was appointed Chief Justiciar and took on comprehensive governing duties, a position he maintained until 1199 CE. The king harbored reservations about tournaments, events in which knights engaged in simulated cavalry fights. Richard allowed tournaments to be organized only by license, restricting them to 5 authorized venues and requiring knights to pay entry fees. Additionally, imposing heavy fines on those holding unauthorized tournaments proved to be an effective method for replenishing the treasury, which was frequently depleted by the king's costly military ventures. Nevertheless, Richard recognized the value of tournaments in preparing his knights for battle, particularly against the French, who were renowned for their equestrian prowess. He sought to have as skilled an army as possible. Considering Richard's constant need for funds to support his troops, it is not unexpected that he did not invest nearly as much in English castles as his father had. Significant resources were directed toward renovating and expanding the Tower of London in 1189 to 90 CE, as evidenced in the Pipe Rolls expenditure archives. However, as the 1190 CE progressed, castle construction came to a standstill. Another tactic for raising funds that the perpetually cash-strapped king employed was authorizing local lords to hunt in royal forests in exchange for a fee. Evidently, Richard required every possible source of income to finance the upcoming conflicts. Following a brief return to England and a second crowning in April 1194 CE at Winchester, Richard spent much of his time campaigning in France. There, he protected the Angevin territories from his former Crusader ally, Philip II of France. The animosity between the two emerged when Richard annulled his engagement with Philip's sister Alice after 20 years without marrying her. Richard proceeded to marry Berengaria of Navarre on May 12, 1191 CE, a union orchestrated by his mother. Interestingly, Berengaria has the distinction of being the only English queen to never set foot in the kingdom she ruled. To mount an attack against Philip, the English king assembled an army by requesting that his barons provide him with just 7 knights each, as opposed to the typical vassal fighting force. In lieu of the troops, Richard required monetary contributions, enabling him to hire mercenaries. The barons gladly consented to this arrangement, as it enabled them to remain and protect their own castles and lands instead of leaving them vulnerable while they were in France. Although Richard may have overlooked England's fortifications, he did invest heavily in Normandy, particularly in constructing Château-Gaillard near the River Seine from 1197 CE to better defend his claims to the territory. However, tragedy struck when Richard sustained a fatal injury during his siege of the Chalice Castle in Aquitaine in 1199 CE. Struck by a crossbow bolt in the neck, Richard succumbed to his gangrenous wound on April 6 and was buried beside his parents at Fontevraud Abbey near Chernon. His effigy at Rouen contains his heart. As Richard left no heir, his brother John succeeded him and ruled until 1216 CE. King John of England would become one of the nation's most despised monarchs, as his oppressive policies and military blunders led to a rebellion by the barons, forcing him to sign the Magna Carta in 1215 CE. This document laid the foundation for a constitution that limited the king's power and safeguarded the barons' rights. Meanwhile, Richard's legendary status as a remarkable medieval knight and king only grew after his death, thanks to his courageous actions and the admiration of his troops. The Anglo-Norman novel romance of Richard Coeur de Lion, published around 1250 CE, further contributed to the expansion of these myths. Having already established himself as a brave warrior, a relentless opponent of the Saracens, and a talented poet, Richard's reputation as the epitome of a chivalrous knight continued to grow. Medieval art often depicted the king in unlikely jousts with Saladin, and he was credited with eloquent speeches about saving his men to prove his worthiness of his crown. Tales even emerged of Richard's fierce opposition to the Arabs, claiming that he cooked and ate his captives. Today, a striking statue of the king outside the Houses of Parliament in London demonstrates the enduring admiration Richard holds in the hearts of the English people. Furthermore, Richard's influence can still be seen in the world of medieval heraldry. The king's choice to display 3 golden lions on a red background on his shield expanded on his family's traditional use of 2 lions. Initially portrayed as rearing figures, the 3 lions eventually came to be depicted strolling forward, their heads facing the viewer. This iconic emblem has since become a fixture in the English royal coat of arms and continues to appear in various badges, including those of the England national football and cricket teams. And there we have it, the incredible life of Richard the Lionheart. A chivalrous knight, a brilliant military leader, and a poet. Richard's enduring legacy is not only visible in the world of medieval heraldry, but also the admiration he continues to command among the English people. In his relentlessly driven pursuit of reclaiming Jerusalem, Richard demonstrated immense bravery and skill, even with the odds stacked against him. Though he may not have spent much of his reign in England, his accomplishments on the battlefield and influence on future crusades have cemented his place in history. So, as we conclude our journey through the life of King Richard, let us remember the Lionheart as a legendary figure who played a crucial role in shaping the medieval world. Thank you for watching this episode on Richard the Lionheart. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more engaging and informative content. Don't forget to turn on your notifications if you want to be the first to know when we drop new episodes. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please leave a comment below.